Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's me, Renee Angelo Mock. We are here for part 2 of our Intro to the Critical Mentoring Supplement. Drop a 1 in the chat if you were here for part 1, so we can see how many people return to us. But I believe I see a lot of new faces with us here today. Which is just fine. We'll do a refresher for those who were not here. I'm excited to have you back and to continue this conversation, particularly during Black History Month. Now, I will make sure that we are regrounded and ready for today's session. Those of you who are not aware, this session is being put on by Mentor Maryland, DC, the regional affiliate for the National Mentoring Partnership, which aims to ensure that there are enough mentoring relationships to support all of America's young people. So we are, of course, supporting the Maryland and DC region, and sessions like these are one of the ways that we aim to support mentoring programs to ensure that you have everything you need to close that mentoring gap. Other ways that we aim to support mentoring programs are, of course, with our no-cost technical assistance. And we have some of our consultants on this call, so hopefully you'll be able to connect with them during some of our breakout conversations. Access to the mentoring connector. So we, we manage our regional database, but the mentoring connector is the national database of mentoring programs. Drop one in the chat if you know that your mentoring program is in the mentoring connector, but it is the only national database of mentoring programs where prospective volunteers can find mentoring opportunities. So if you're not in there, you want to get in there, and you can connect with our team that manages it. Dayon and Andrew and Jordan can help you get in there so prospective mentors can find you and connect with you. Promotion of mentoring best practices, the elements of effective practice, and the many supplements, including this one. We host important professional development trainings and conversations on these. So again, we can ensure that we are doing our very best out in the field. Access to the National Quality Mentoring System. We talked a little bit about this last time, but if you want to ensure that your program is doing the best it possibly can, you can access the NQMS through no-cost technical assistance. Connection to funding opportunities. Please make sure that you are receiving our newsletter. We aim to get information about this out once a month and more. And Sam Bellamy, who's on the call, is going to be facilitating a professional development about that in May. Spoiler alert. So that'll be marketed on our social media and in a newsletter. So you will want to come, and I'm sure it will be packed. So, well, no limit for attendees, but that will be a great training that we'll be happy to be putting on for you all. So the many ways that you can engage in our training, keep the chat lively. We've got reactions, all these little ways to click, raise your hand, reactions. We're going to be recording. Our first session is already on our YouTube, and feel free to share that out with anybody who can't be there today. And my colleague Michael Miley is on this call. So if you want to send a message just to them for technical assistance, just press a little down caret and look for their name, Michael Miley McCaskill. And if you can send a message to me, you can do that as well from there. Shane slide, what's happening? Okay. And I want to check in again about our community standards. If you've never joined us for our training before, we are implementing these community standards now to ensure that these trainings, we have a standard expectation for us as Mentor Maryland DC, and for you all as our community, which is how we view you all and those who engage in our services. So I'm going to review these now. And yeah, as long as you stay on this call, we aim to uphold these community standards as your facilitators and you as our attendees. Okay. So our community is open to all, but we acknowledge that our country is, there's deep-seated racism, sexism, homo, transphobia, misogyny, ableism, and that is pervasive. So we're actively to work against those, and especially, in the context of us working with young people. But we acknowledge they exist, and then we, approach our work knowing that. We want to, in this space, share openly and listen even more so, and be open that when we share, there's opportunities that we may be hurting others. So being understanding of that as well. We want to be generous with our positive assumptions, but also don't be afraid to ask genuine questions. I always say I love asking questions, and I'm never afraid to ask questions, but I know that not everybody feels that way. So it's always my aim to make this a place where people are not afraid to ask questions. And please do. Please know that I personally am never offended. And I'll also never lie about something that I don't know. So be afraid to ask a genuine question if you have one. No matter your role here today, be a host. We're going to have lots of breakout spaces. So as you move into those spaces, whether there's a mentor Maryland DC rep there with you, be a host in those spaces. Again, we don't necessarily endeavor to create a safe or comfortable space, but rather a brave space where discomfort can be explored and beliefs and practices can be challenged, especially with the topic that we're talking about. And for those who were here last time, this supplement really is challenging us to have conversations, and mostly is posing questions to us to explore our practices and how we're doing this work. So that really applies to how this session will go today. And we want this community experience to be supportive, educational, but we also want to have fun. So please bring your full and present self. We welcome you, and we really do appreciate that you are here. And we really do mean that. No fixing, saving, or advising or correcting each other. This is specifically from, pardon me, from the Touchstone framework, and it's self-explanatory, but really is about trusting one's inner teacher. But if you do feel the need to deliver feedback, we just ask that you ask permission first and do the listening first. So we appreciate you abiding these community standards, and if these community standards, we find that they are violated, we will follow up accordingly. And we, again, appreciate you listening, and we'll update these as needed. Drop a 1 in the chat if this person looks familiar. If you've heard of critical mentoring, well, those who came last time, I see you. I know that you're here, but for those who are not here, drop a 1 if you know who this person, if you know about critical mentoring, and yeah, just your familiarity, so I can get us all on the same page so we can get moving. Cool. All right, so this is Dr. Torrey. I'm going to let her speak. We'll do a quick review of the history, and then we'll get right back into the meat of what we were doing last time, because, yeah, this session exists because we didn't get through everything we wanted to last time. So I want to get right back into what we were doing, but we can't skip Dr. Torrey. She's right here, so I'm going to let her speak. I think I need to pause my share to do a video. Hold on.
Critical mentoring was really developed out of necessity. It was developed because we live in a context, exist in a context where we have to think constantly about race, gender, sexuality, ability, class, etc. Then we also have nonprofit systems, specifically mentoring and youth development organizations, that don't really explicitly deal with that. That was true in 2017 when I wrote the Critical Mentoring book, and on some level, it's still true today in 2022. So we think about critical mentoring and the work that it requires of us. It's really about thinking about how we enter spaces. It's really exploring who we are, our biases, our thoughts. It's really exploring our limitations, how we interact and navigate through systems. Really thinking historically and even in a very modern way about our context. I think most importantly, it's about taking all of that information and applying it to who we are as mentors, as teachers, who we are as administrators, or any person who is coming into contact with or working with young people. Critical Mentoring 2.0 really shouldn't exist. But since it does, we have to think about what it means to shift our gaze, to shift our hopes, and on some level, to even think about what it means to radically freedom dream. We can't keep doing what we were doing. We have to recreate, we have to reimagine, we have to rebuild. And so Critical Mentoring 2.0 is really about taking that foundational theory of centering young people, of talking openly and explicitly about race, about class, and all of those other sort of isms. And it's about thinking, how do we recreate and reimagine spaces where young people can be free and where we can be free as well.
Well, hold on, lost you guys. Great. Thank you, Dr. Tori. So she's saying this is Critical Mentoring 2.0 because she wrote the original book on critical mentoring. So if you've not read that book, still exists, please read it. And this is the Critical Mentoring Supplement. Last time I mentioned a book about the history of mentoring, which this history is referring to that, and I never named that book. And that book is Older and Wiser. I finally found it on my shelf. I can't see the author, but that book that starts at the history of mentoring and talks about a lot of the power dynamics and things like that. And Dr. Tori is saying that we want to know about that context, the historical context of what mentoring is built off of, and we need to know about the current context that our youth exist in, and how do we really acknowledge that that exists, what our youth, the world that they actually exist in, and how do we prepare our youth for the world that they are in, and make our work with them absolutely youth-centered. I'm going to move forward a little bit quicker through that. Clicking. Cool. So the aim of critical mentoring is to provide us, mentors and youth workers, the spaces for young people to develop into themselves. If you've been to other trainings by me and other work through the National Mentoring Partnership, Becoming a Better Mentor, etc., we know that identity development is incredibly important, particularly for youth with marginalized identities. So critical mentoring, our aim is exactly that, to ensure that youth have those spaces to develop into themselves. And again, it's rooted in the work that we're acknowledging all those kind of aspects of identity, and that we are acknowledging that, we're working with it, and we're shifting away from the original hierarchies that mentoring is founded in, truly, and that mentoring is shifting into being collaborative, being liberatory, and that youth are centered and really leaders in this work. Cool. These 4 building blocks of critical mentoring are, pardon me, are really, we're going to continue to come back to as what we're trying to build in youth and have youth build in themselves through our mentoring programs, your mentoring programs, and through their mentoring relationships. So first is critical reflection, this opportunity to have meaningful thought and dialogue about their own experiences and how they interact with systems and institutions, their lives, and how they're interacting with the powers that be, essentially, right? That collective identification, right? That what was I saying earlier? That identity development, right? So what groups do they belong to, and that sense of identity as belonging to a group. And belonging is so important, and something that even as adults we're talking about more and more, right? DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is becoming more and more important. So what does that mean for young people? How can we help them build that collective identification? Political self-efficacy, moving from that reflections piece toward action and building up those feelings and that confidence so they can go out into the world and make positive change happen. What does that mean? What does that look like for them? And how do we build up that efficacy, that movement from that thoughtful reflection towards something and that positive change? And then that critical action, the stage in which real world change is demanded. They know what they want to ask for, and they know what to challenge. And then the different types of action: personal action, things they do on their own; group action, things they can do with their small network; mass social action, like a protest; and digital action, of course, things that we can engage in digitally. So we'll continue to come back to these building blocks as we go through the aspects of the EEP, which we'll move to in just a second. Cool. Of course, and where do mentors fit into this, right? The young people need support in building these critical consciousness and getting to these building blocks, right? So mentors have a role in creating the spaces for young people to have spaces to reflect, to move towards action. So young mentors are guides in this space, right? Mentors, right, we're moving past this idea of the mentors, the idea that moving past that pedagogy of like we're dumping into someone, but rather that we're guiding and helping to navigate. So that's going to be the role of mentors in this idea of critical mentoring. I'm going to move past this slide, but in the critical mentoring supplement, there is a literature review and a criticism of the literature review. But the fact of the reality is we know and we're familiar with what mentoring and mentoring research has looked like in the past: seeing youth as problem, white saviorism and saviorism in general. Certain types of mentoring programs get labeled as the gold standard, and those only get reviewed to become evidence-based and the like, avoiding the examination of root problems of those systems and things like that, and mentoring being seen as a solution instead of looking at systems as fixing systems as solutions, and being sponsored by same repressive systems. Where do funds come from and the like? So that's all part of the resource that you can engage. This is a very dynamic resource. It's not structured like typical supplements. And that's what I'm going to explain now for those who didn't join us last time. So in a typical supplement for the element of effective practice, so is anybody, drop a 1 if you're not familiar with the element of effective practice? Bring open the chat. Okay, cool. So elements of effective practice, we love it, we stand by it. The typical supplements are, those added benchmark, or those added benchmarks and enhancements to the supplement. This supplement is a multimedia adventure. It's really quite awesome. So because they pose it as there's no one best way to run a program, which is true. It's not. It's instead of posited as just a checklist, there's questions for each of this typical standards: recruitment, screening, training, etc. Instead of that checklist of do this to be a critical mentoring program, etc. So we're going to go through those questions and meet in small groups to have those discussions, and then we'll get into what else the supplement has to provide for you and your staff and things to go through. So before we transition into that, I want to just kind of see who's here to see how we might be able to best use the resource, and also see again what areas people want to talk about, because we did talk about some of these things last time, so I don't want to spend too much time for those who were here last time, but just see what standards people are most interested in or feel they need the most kind of discussion about. I have us budgeted for until 2 p.m., which is a little bit longer than a standard training that we usually do here. So also want to make sure that everybody knows that and it's cool to stay here until 2. But first, I'm going to launch a poll just to see who is in the room. Am I going to launch a poll? Yes, I am. Oh, I didn't do my other poll. Okay, who is here today? Are you a program leader, a staff, a mentor? Are you a mentee? Are you part of a match who is on here on the call? Is this up? Can everyone see this? Michael Molly, did I do this right? Okay. Let me know your role. I need to add an other to this because I know this doesn't apply to everyone. But let me know your role. I'll give another 45 seconds so you can answer that poll for me. Can anyone see the poll? I'm seeing that no one is participating, or I see that 0 out of 10. Michael Molly, do you see people participating?
I see 9 out of 10 participated.
Oh, well, then you can end the poll.
All right.
I see nothing. And I was like getting more and more heartbroken as it was happening. Michael Molly, end the poll and then read the results because I'm seeing a lie.
Okay, I ended the poll and I clicked sharing. We have 5 out of 9, so 56% program leader executive,
Okay,
22% program staff, 22% mentors, and that is it.
great. Thank you so much. Good. So it's great that we have some leaders in the room, definitely have some influence over program or program structure. I always like to encourage, leaders for sure, we want to include everybody in this conversation, and critical mentoring, of course, it wants you to include youth in these conversations as well. And it's going to be asking you that as we move forward as well. I realized that my poll about the standards does not exist. So I'm going to drop in the chat the numbers about which standards you may be interested in. So I'm going to put that in now. So 1 would be recruitment, 2 would be screening, 3 would be training, 4 would be matching, 5 would be monitoring and support, and 6 would be closure. I'm about to send that right now in the chat. Let me know which of are the greatest concern for you and your program. And yeah, we'll just check in. I'll just check in with you guys about which and why this may be of best concern. And maybe we'll have large group conversations about that. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of monitoring and support. Recruitment. And recruitment always refers to young people as well. Actually, everything refers to young people. Okay, great. All right, cool. So we'll definitely spend some time as a large group talking about monitoring and support for sure. Okay, cool. So like I said, the structure of which we really think about the EEP, those standards and benchmarks, they're also don't have the typical titles of the standards. So instead of recruiting young people or recruiting mentees, it's finding and welcoming youth and families. So what I've done here is on the right, I pulled the benchmarks that what I thought matched the most to the questions that are posed in the critical mentoring supplement. So in our last session, we did review this standard. So we have the recruiting mentees here and the recruiting mentors here, but I did see that there was somebody who wanted to discuss this. So I believe that was Tiana. So Tiana, can you read the left side, our critical mentoring questions regarding finding and welcoming youth and families? Tiana, are you there? know. Michael Molly, can you read it? On the left.
Yes. Finding and welcoming youth and families. How we make our program and goals and philosophy clear to youth and families, both in terms of marketing materials and during initial orientations and community presentations. How can we find the young people who best fit our vision and make them aware of the opportunity? How can we refer young youth and their families to other service providers locally if they are not a good fit for what we are offering? How can we make caregivers aware of the role we want them to play in this work? How can we bring them in and make them feel included? How can we empower youth to recruit their peers to the program? What would our word of mouth strategy look like? What's the maximum number of youth we can serve well? And how do we handle it if the demand outpaces our capacity? Program engages in recruitment strategies that realistically portray the event benefits, practices, supports, and challenges of being mentored in the program. Program recruits mentees whose needs best match the services offered by the program. Program has a publicly available written statement outlining eligibility requirements for mentees in this program. Program encourages mentees to recruit other peers to be mentees whose needs match the services provided by the program when relevant.
Thank you. And actually, these little stars mean that those are enhancements in the original EEP. So from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, I like to believe that you all have a pretty good handle on these questions that the critical mentoring supplement is posing, but prove me right or prove me wrong. How's everybody feeling about these questions that are posed to you all? Do you feel like you have a good handle on it? These are things that you try to do. They're hard to do given the context of your program or your young people. How are we feeling? I see a thumbs up from Christina. Especially because I know, especially with engaging with families is like such a must. I feel like people are with it. Cool. Let's move on to recruiting mentors, which we call finding welcoming mentors. So what are the motivations and mindsets we are looking for in our volunteer mentors? What kinds of lived experience, education, or backgrounds will be helpful in doing this critical mentoring work? Are teaching, advocacy, or similar backgrounds a requirement? What other skills should mentors bring? What would be helpful in terms of participating in the structure and format of our mentoring sessions? So, right, if you have a certain mentoring model, who might best fit? And again, on the right, pardon me, are benchmarks from the original EEP. So these questions on the left, which again, in our original session, we had time to discuss, are these questions that you've posed? Maybe not that necessarily specifically about critical mentoring, but in general, per the context of your program, had conversations about, right, specific mindsets, specific motivations, specific lived experiences or educations. Do you try to be specific in your recruitment? Or, and I know that many programs just feel strapped to recruit in general, do you feel like you don't have the luxury to put specific criteria for your recruitment? How is that feeling for you guys? I think something that is, oh, Shane, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, Shanae.
Oh, Shanae. Yes,
I think the strategies definitely are needed and are doable. I'm wondering from other providers or from providers on the call, how does this look realistically as far as budgeting time within a program year and or budgeting resources to implement these very specific components towards this objective?
Great question. What program are you from, Shanae?
I'm from a small organization that supports program providers. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I'm more of a support to some mentoring organizations.
I think that's a great question. And I think that my perspective of what I've been hearing is that recruitment has still not really settled since. Oh, Aaron, the audio cut off. Shanae, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, like these specific strategies of, recruiting the mentors, like what does that look like within a program year? Are there specific periods that people budget time and or staff or, plan activities around? Is it a multiple year, point that you're doing these things? And what are some of the activities that kind of bring these recommendations to life? Or not even recommendations, standards to life?
I was going to say, personally, for our program, our program is based out of Howard County Public School System. So we're technically just going into the Department of Special Ed. So we're already in the schools, and we kind of use it as an additional resource. And so, whereas it's actually also quite challenging, it also makes it easier to be able to connect with the teachers and be able to have those conversations. So I can kind of have those active conversations and be able to say, okay, this person may be good for a mentor, but they just need these other trainings first, or this person isn't quite ready for it. I'm just going to have them kind of shadow, and then I'll just keep having those conversations, and I can have a more basis for them. That's usually how I kind of find those perfect fits for the students.
I can also speak to that. Our model's a little different. We have a summer program where we have one mentor to a small group of students, but what we make sure to do is budget money for alumni to be a part of this hiring process. So they have conversations about these bullet points, and then they're involved in the group interviews of our mentors so that they can have in the back of their mind what they believe to be the motivations and mindsets and lived experience that they think would be best for the incoming students, thinking back to when they were those students. So we make sure that we're budgeting money to pay young people to be a part of this recruitment strategy. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Thank you. This is an important point about paying young people, which would definitely be important. We're talking about centering youth in this work, that youth doing part of the work of the program to bring people in, that they would be compensated for their time and effort. Appreciate that. Great. So for this next standard, which would be screening, here it's phrased program participation and safety, which of course, right? When we're screening for mentors and for young people, this is it's important it's who we're welcoming in, who we're screening out as well. It's for how do we keep our program safe. And for a lot of us, we don't do a lot of screening out of young people, or even really of mentors, or that might only be when it comes down to background checks and the like. On the right here from the EEP, I didn't add a lot of the things around background checks because I know that and trust that you all have your background check things in background check standards in order. But here on the left, I have the questions from the critical EEP pulled, which are: how will we ensure that youth and their families and mentors commit to the expectations for the program participation that are set for the program? What are the levels of participation that you require, if you require them? How will you assess your mentors' ability to engage in critical conversations and dialogue? What kinds of role play scenarios or other opportunities to demonstrate their ability to do this work can you provide? So again, in that screening process, whatever that might be for your program. How will you assess your mentors' safety for working around young people? Will we conduct background checks or reference checks? If so, what kinds of criteria might we consider disqualifying, right? So you're doing a background check. What does that mean? What is a disqualifying background check? And how can we involve youth in interviewing and vetting prospective mentors? So what I'm going to do now is going to break you into 2 breakout rooms. I'm going to share this slide so you can see it in your breakout room, and you can get into and use these questions on the left as your discussion points. It is 12:41. So I'll give you a good 15 minutes in those rooms so you can really get into it. I'll send Michael Molly around in case that's too little time, because we had really great conversations last time, and then we'll meet back here and chat it out. So I'm gonna pause the recording and open those rooms. Welcome back, everyone. It was reported to me that you were having some very engaging conversations. So yeah, what came up for you in the breakout rooms regarding screening for program participation and safety as it pertains to critical mentoring?
Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Jeff Walker. One of the things that we brought up in the group was adding youth to the reference checks of young people outside of just, utilizing your past supervisors or managers, right? I want to hear from a young person who you've impacted. And I think that centers like young people's voices in the work, right? It also kind of like informs the type of mentor or volunteer we're having into our programming. And if I get someone that's volunteering and you want to get into, you say you've been doing mentoring or working with young people and you don't have one young person that could tell me a story, I'm gonna call it Cap. I'm gonna say that's Cap.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea, because usually that's a question, right? What's your experience with young people? And you're gonna do some kind of reference check anyway. So why not call a young person? That's such a cool idea. I love that. Yeah, anything else anybody like to share? Nice, Nicole. Now, Patty Point mentor, I had 2 of my mentors write my recommendation letters. Thanks. I think reference checks are really important and an opportunity to be flexible in how you do them. And in the literature and in the EEP and the supplements, they suggest different kinds of ways that you can do them, by calls, even by making visits and things like that. there are, I think, yeah, and with your suggestions as well, there are different kind of ways to do the references. So I think that is a flexible way to put youth at the center, whether it's you're calling youth that know the prospective volunteer in check, or whether it's maybe that your youth are making those calls, right? Involving them in the process. So I think there's a lot of possible exploration there to alter or edit your screening process to put youth at the center. Cool. That's so fun. I used to do some reference checks too, so now I'm wishing I included more people to help me out with that. Cool. So next is our training section. And including putting youth at the center, what can we teach our youth as well? So, and I'm going to pose this question to you here instead of putting it into groups. So, and I'm going to also make the assumption, and again, prove me right or wrong, that there is some of you may be involved in doing some versions of these kind of things already. So what kind of preparation will youth and caregivers need to be prepared to participate in the program? How can we prepare our youth and families to have leadership roles in the program? How can we encourage your young people to use their mentors as tools in their own development, right? So, and I think this is something, when I went to the mentoring program, it was, in mentor program I was with, it was attached to after school program. So there was a huge portion of young people who didn't get to participate in the mentoring aspect of the program. So for the youth who did, I was always trying to help them leverage that opportunity to be like, this mentor is here, how are we going to make the most of it, right? So how are you able to train and get a youth ready to use that mentor as a tool of their own development? How can we utilize program alumni in designing and delivering training? Would there be any value in having mentors and youth go through trainings together and create transparency and shared accountability around this work? So, and I'll just share from my experience again, because my former boss was very, very youth-centered in the way that she did work, and it was always pushing me to involve youth in this work, as I was the one who facilitated training for mentors about how do I include our young people in those spaces, and bringing youth with me, and having our youth prepared to facilitate trainings and to train our youth to be ready again, to get them ready to be in the mentoring program and to have a mentor. So we're not going to do a full breakout about this topic, but I really encourage you to consider how you're preparing youth to have mentors, how you're preparing youth to be leaders in the program. And again, for our leaders in the room, that we're including voices from all levels of your programming, from your youth to your mentors to your staff, and that there's leadership opportunities for, of course, for leaders in the work. But I know that there are people who want to talk about training mentors. So we can have a group conversation here, but let me know what questions stand out for you. So again, on the right here is our basic benchmarks from the original EEP. But on the left here, as far as mentor trainings, what comes up for you about what's really needed in your program, what's difficult in your program, and what concerns you have as far as the preparation and teaching of incoming mentors to your program? Which one of these questions stands out for you as maybe a roadblock, or something that you want to kind of pull the group here for something we can maybe troubleshoot with you? Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, drop in the chat. So we're thinking about preparing our mentors to be critical mentors and to do critical mentoring. We want to ensure they have a strong and collective understanding of the program philosophy, right? How to engage in the activities of the program. I say a lot in these kinds of trainings that we want to ensure that your mentors know the mission and vision of your program, and that they know that how their role helps to carry out that vision and mission, because that will also lead to their retention in your program. And especially if you are trying to be a critical mentoring program, how are they a part of that? And that will keep them engaged and help them feel part of this bigger collective mission. How are we going to ensure that their mentors know how to handle certain situations, both crises and smaller challenges? How do those things, what do we do when those things come up? How do we get them ready for that at that pre-match stage? How do you ensure that mentors can work effectively with each other to deliver consistent messages to our youth as it pertains to critical mentoring? How do we know how to support critical action and build our young people to use their voices and power? How do we ensure our mentors understand key concepts like intersectionality, honoring diversity, which may not always come naturally based on lived experience? We've talked here and had trainings here about cultural humility, which is a topic that we is covered in the Becoming a Better Mentor resource, which is a resource that's written for mentors. So that's something that we would definitely encourage you to pose to your mentors and get to them. That already exists and is written just for them. But what else can be done to prepare to be true mentors? We think about how long does pre-match training need to be. The original EEP benchmark does suggest 2 hours as far as pre-match training. But again, that's for basic content, not necessarily for critical mentoring content. So again, if you're thinking about what does it take to be critical mentoring, to be a critical mentor, that's for you and your program to discuss. And again, we think about supplemental training as it goes on. When we think about that critical mentoring long-term plan, it's going to involve supplemental training. What are those ongoing topics? What is going to be like? All right. Go ahead.
I just had a question to the providers on the call. Knowing that we're shifting mentoring kind of standards and strategies into this critical mentoring to meet more varied needs that we probably were missing all along for young people and for human beings, period. What has shifted with this preparation for your organizations? I remember in the first session of critical mentoring where the gentleman from Montgomery College talked about them having an 8-hour pre-service training that they go through, and they kind of work through these capacities and these skill sets that some of the mentors may not be exposed to in their personal or professional life, but now they need to be aware of certain approaches. How has that shifted for your organizations now that we're adding in topics like diversity and inclusion and belonging? Has that changed kind of what you do, and do you do it all as pre-service or do you spread it out? And then how do you avoid the risk of fatigue from the mentor being, trained and any attrition that may come from them, just like being scared, like, oh my God, 8 hours of training. Has that come up, and how have your organizations handled it?
I mean, I can speak to, again, our program is a little bit different, but we do, we sort of make sure that our training is modeling and really mimics what we're doing with the young people as well. So like that sense of belonging that our staff is getting that with each other, and they're engaged in almost the exact same activities as the students, so that when we unpack that, they can unpack it from the perspective of the facilitation as well as from the perspective of being a student in that space, right? And then just thinking about like what worked for them, what didn't work for them, how we diversify for other kinds of young people. So I think, and that takes away from the scare of like an 8-hour training, because they're really mostly engaged the whole time, wearing two hats and having stopping points to like reflect with those two hats. So I think like that's something that, again, just mitigates that scary 8-hour thing, and also ensures that like we're all sort of on the same page about the kind of space that we're creating with young people, with the idea that, of course, everybody's entering into that with different personalities and different needs and different interests and different abilities. And so like, how are you just aware of leading with love and being understanding and being aware and having communication and all that stuff. I don't know if that's helpful, but there you go.
Very, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's a great question. And I think it's a question that we're asked a lot, and that programs want to continue to provide training and also ensure that their first training is as the best it can possibly be, because getting supplemental trainings organized and all the mentors there is always more difficult than the first training that you have to get them there at. So there's that. And then also supplementally, mentors will say that they want to talk to other mentors about that kind of experience, and that which is also important for mentors to have that space as well. It's important for engagement and retention. And I always encourage programs to do that. And we've tried to hold those spaces as well, because those are also learning opportunities that are important. So how do we maximize those as also, and leverage those as also potential platforms to also use as a topic building opportunity to, again, turn into a training, etc. So I think it's difficult for sure. And yeah, it's so hard. And I say this as someone who, I literally just have to recruit, screen, train mentors, because if you're lucky, you work at a program where that is someone's job to do, or whether it's like a paid staff member, full-time staff member to do it, and not like a part-time staff member or a volunteer or someone. So I will say that it is difficult. So programs, please continue to give Mentor Maryland DC feedback about that, so we can figure out how to best utilize and get you the resources to figure that out, because it's difficult. Giving mentors the opportunity to sit in the mentees and student seat allows them to experience the feeling that their mentees will likely have. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Maria. So we're going to move on to what would typically be called matching, which here is framed as forming relationships between youth and mentors. Matching is both an art and a science, and is theoretical and also not theoretical. So here on the right, we have what's again from the original EEP, which really speaks mostly to what considerations are you making and who is giving consent to being a part of the match, is really what's framed here on the right. And then here on the left, what critical mentoring is asking us to consider. Will we match youth in individual mentors, right? One-on-one. Will we have an unmatched format between adult and youth? Will there be a combination? What's our rationale for, what's our theory of change? And we'll talk about logic models in a little bit. will youth have a voice in the process of being matched with their mentors? What does that look like? What does that input look like if they do have a voice in that process? If we're not creating matches, how are staff ensuring the full engagement of our youth so that no one's slipping through the cracks or getting that watered down experience? If we're going with that unmatched model, how are we showing that there's a consistent mentoring experience? How are we making sure that staff are sharing information with the entire staff, and our mentors are able to effectively support youth that they may see more infrequently or sporadically, right? If there's a group approach, what criteria are we using to form groups? There is an EEP supplement about group mentoring, by the way. So if you are using a group approach, there's information and research for that. But how do you ensure good group dynamics? In general, just in general, how do you ensure good group dynamics? Is there a need for project-based grouping for interests and needs? So there's a lot of considerations, and for those of you with programs in here today, drop in the chat, what is your mentoring model? Are you one-to-one? Are you group? Are you project-based? Are you unstructured? Yeah, let me know, so we can get an idea of like what we're looking at here. One-to-one, group. And currently, do youth have voice in your matching model? Or let's know, what's your matching? Oh my gosh. There's scary wind and thunder over here. I don't know where anyone else is. Getting loud outside. Yeah, can anybody share what their matching process looks like? And no judgment whatsoever, because again, matching is a weird art, gut, theory, science, and also not. Anybody share what their matching looks like?
I guess I can share what our process looks like.
Yeah.
So when a potential mentor fills out the application, we ask them a whole bunch of questions about themselves and their interests and things like that. So it gives me a bit idea what they're like. And then for our kids, we see them at site, which is 2 hours. So we get to spend time with them before they actually get a mentor. And we also have our student interview. So our student interviews vary. So some, their parents are like standing right over them and the kids are pretty much telling us what their parents want us to hear. And then there's also the versions where the parent isn't there and the student kind of speaks a little bit open and more freely. But then when they come to site, we actually see what the kid is like. So then we can match them based off of, will this be a good fit? So for instance, I will meet a person, they'll become a mentor, and then I know based off when I met them and based off their application and also the trainings that they have, that this student might be a good fit for them.
Great. So right, you have you have multiple contexts of information about your student, and then you've intentionally left some questions to get to know this prospective mentor to do your matching that way.
Correct.
Great.
And
So
then
kind of interest-based and also, yeah, I mean, some kind of gut about getting to know two people.
right. And then I'll also follow up with them like, hey, do y'all actually like working with each other? And if
Right, that's
they
that
say
monitoring
no,
and support as well, doing that check-in.
yeah.
Great. Does that process sound familiar to anybody? Is anybody else doing something radically different? Cool. And I think that's pretty standard and valid, very valid. And I think that's mindful of the original EEP, and again, totally valid, not out of left field or anything like that. And I think again, what critical mentoring here is asking of us, how can we center youth a bit more? How can we continually hold ourselves accountable to ensuring that these matches are well done, right? And what do we consider, what are our standards for a good match, a successful match, a match that is helping our students, right, have critical self-reflection, feel politically self-efficacious, and again, this takes us back to, right, what are our standards for, right, a mentor who is going to be a critical mentor. So again, we kind of write out these ideals for what a critical mentor is, what a critical mentoring relationship is, and have those ideals and those standards. Then we can screen for those things. We can write our own, when I say our own, I mean our program's own our own standards for those things, and we can meet for our own models, internal models for what that might look like. And what I love about this supplement is that you get to determine for yourselves what that will look like for your program, because every program is different, and it's not telling you what it has to exactly look like. And I love that. I love that. I don't have to tell anybody exactly what to do. You guys get to figure it out. And again, I'm happy, and myself, my colleagues here at Mentor Maryland DC, and especially our consultants, are happy to be a part of those conversations, and through our no-cost technical assistance, help guide those conversations and hold that space for you guys. But again, I think what's powerful about this supplement is that you get to invite your young people to be a part of this conversation, and you get to still have the ownership of what your program's mission and vision is. And then this gets to be an added value to it, to your amazing program. Cool. So I want to move into standard 5, which I know is important to you all, and this is monitoring and support. How can we prepare to support our mentees in moments of crisis? What types of support will our youth need as they transition from critical understanding into critical motivation and action? And then how can we ensure that every young person in our program has the experience with critical mentoring with this supplement? What structures do we need to have in place to check in with youth regularly and spur their engagement? So monitoring and support is right. It's everything that happens right after they're matched. The mentor and mentee is matched. This is their time in the program until either a planned or unplanned closure, right? Everything that happens while a young person is matched with that adult, that's monitoring and support. The work, just the bulk, just all the work. So I'm going to break you into your breakout rooms again. It's 1:26. I'll give us until 1:40, and we'll come back, and then we'll debrief. We'll get to the logic model quickly, and then I'll give you a tour of the multimedia critical supplement website. So I'll pause our recording and break. Welcome back, everyone. What came up in your conversation about supporting mentoring relationships that we hope are critical mentoring relationships? Feel free to come off mute, drop in the chat.
Hey, Renee.
Hey.
So in our group, Aaron shared out that, he's in the schools right now, but Aaron also shared out that, asking the young person, what they need instead of prescribing, centering their voice and walking through those challenges with them. But it's really just like, they know what they're going through better than anyone else. So they're going to also know what they're going to need, or or maybe they don't know, right? But we have to be able to listen to what they're going through and listen to what they think they need, right? And then help them with our own experiences and additional resource and knowledge, guide them through that.
Yes, yes, great. No, thank you for sharing. This actually just came up. My colleague Dana and I, we were doing a private training and we were talking about attunement, which is also a topic covered in Becoming a Better Mentor. So please seek out that free resource. But when attunement is the idea of, doing that self-check before we check in with our mentees. But, if our mentees are sharing something with us and they're telling us that they don't feel good, that instead of they say, if they're expressing feelings that are negative, if we go in with, oh, they're saying they don't, they're sad or whatever, if we're going in and we're immediately trying to fix, then the message that they're getting is, oh, this is not necessarily somebody that I can share my true feelings with, because instead of letting me share my feelings and hearing me out, they're going to just come in with solution, and not even hear about why I'm feeling this way, what I might want to do about this problem or situation. And they're just going to come in and fix that fixing. And instead, let's, give that child that space to be who they are, hear them out, and maybe it help them to explore their own solutions, and give them that space. So that, that's really, really important. And again, people are agreeing with Nicole in the chat. Helping a student in crisis is critical, and how critical that administrators that we report to in it, everybody on every level has that point of training, and is really, really important. Great, guys. And I forgot to share that there's even more questions that you all can take back to your teams about supporting mentoring relationships. So, how do we handle a situation when people are participating as intended? So problem solving structures that you may be able to create when things arise. How do you get people back on track? When it comes to critical action, how are we debriefing? How do we leave young people feeling empowered and heard? How do we celebrate when things are going well? The fun stuff. When there's success, when there's achievement, what do we do to celebrate those accomplishments and honor our mentoring family for what they do? Which honoring our mentors is something that's in the original EEP, something that we want to be doing for retention and engagement of our mentors, no matter what. So how do we do that, particularly when we're engaging, when our mentors are helping our young people engage in that critical mentoring way? What are we doing to acknowledge that in our young people? So we want to end, of course, on closure, which I definitely prefer this kind of concept, this idea of transitioning mentoring relationships, because closure, of course, I mean, even the original idea of closure isn't always that mentoring relationships always end. There's always, like it says here on the right, anticipated and unanticipated closures, but really it's what the first EEP is really about the procedures around that, which I'm always encouraging programs to consider those procedures. But I really love these questions, and I think that these are questions that should definitely be revisited by entire teams, and especially the young people, who I think are often never considered in these conversations about these protocols. But what does goodbye look like in this program? If a young person prematurely leaves in the group, what does that look like? And what steps do you all take to process that closure? Because staff is affected, other young people are affected, mentors are affected when a young person leaves the program, and often young people may not have a say in their unanticipated leaving of a program, and that will have a big effect on a lot of people. What steps do you take to close down a program cycle or a year of the program? Are there ceremonies or rituals, or do you bring special meaning to those times of years for everyone to have that transitional time of year? Do you involve, caregivers or even the broader community? Are you based in a school or in a certain area, community center or a building where you can involve people around you to celebrate this, this transitional time of year, end of the program cycle? Are those times where you can engage, with alumni, with your supporters, and that you can also, spread the word about some of those achievements that we were just talking about? And very importantly, do you have policies regarding mentor and staff and youth having contact after their involvement in the program? So if you are a program that youth graduate from, or, you serve 8th graders and then, they move on to 9th grade, what is the policy regarding contact between mentors and young people, or staff and young people, when they transition out of the program? This is very important to have clarity around and to ensure that mentors and families and everybody is informed about. And again, I'm not telling you what those protocols and procedures should be. I'm just saying everybody needs to know what they are for safety and procedural and understanding, and to reduce harm and to reduce hurt feelings, to say the least. So have those conversations. What needs to be procedural, make procedures, write it down, inform everybody. And that's about that. And procedures, closure procedures, like I said again, are often the ones that get the most overlooked, because we never want things to end. And also this work feels never ending because you're gonna stay here no matter where these kids go. So definitely revisit these, include young people where you can in these conversations, because matching, which of course we want to include young people, these conversations are just as closure conversations or transitioning conversations are just as important. So please include young people if you can. This is a very ugly picture of a logic model that I made, but that was to hold space for the actual picture of the logic model, which actually I'm going to drop it in the chat really quick. So there is a critical mentoring sample logic model. If you were to create a new program or to ensure that your program's logic model matched up, drop a 1 in the chat if your program, if you are familiar with your program's logic model, or if your program has a logic model that you're familiar with. And again, no judgment. It's fine. Can everyone see this? Okay, cool. So if you're not familiar with the concept of a logic model, and this is something that many of our consultants, i.e. Jeff on this call, can help you, set up your program, new program, old program, to align with, because these are things that grantors and funders want to know about your program. And essentially it's just, what does your program do from the very, very start to the very, very end? So, right, what are the needs of your young people, the youth, the area, the community? What are the assumptions and preconditions? So again, this is that critical mentoring piece. And then what's really great here at the bottom is that it's giving you the definitions, where you're going to start. Sorry, there's a special guest on my lap. But it's really sets you up. What are we putting in? Again, what's getting put in by you, your young people, your staff, your families, financial resources, activities. What is your program doing? What's happening there? Again, that critical motivation, this critical reflection, you're going to see all that, those building blocks we talked about there, those outputs, those numbers, those bits of data that you're going to be recording on a daily basis, that I know mentoring programs just love to do, as someone who used to have to do that, but These are those things that we have to track for reports. And then what are those short-term and long-term outcomes? What are the possible effects of critical mentoring programs? This is such a wonderful tool that a critical mentoring supplement has provided for you. Like I said, I dropped it in the chat. I'll make sure you get it in the follow-up email. But if this is something that you think you want to get your program aligned to, this can be a really great resource for you to work through. If you want to get connected with one of our consultants, they can help get your logic model aligned with. But thank you, critical mentoring supplement. We appreciate you. So that's downloadable in the chat right now. And then I just wanted, okay. And then also, just like in every supplement, there is resources for defining and designing your model. Again, how do we get youth into this process? How our mentors positioned in relationship to your youth, and of course, what's your program's theory of change, which again has to do with that logic model, and what are the assets supporting your youth. So who's in your community that can that you should be connecting with, because we want to be anchored in the community and also ensure that the community needs and wants you to be there. What kind of staffing do you need? Your staff are your assets, and we hope you're able to treat them as such. You all are amazing. And who can fund this work in authentic ways? Again, going back to, we want to ensure that we're not being funded by oppressive systems. And then evaluation. There's a great section of the supplement about involving youth in evaluation, and I'll leave it for you to review that. Sorry about my special guest here, but youth can have a part in evaluating your own program. And again, youth are meant to be a part of every part of critical mentoring and critical mentoring programs. Okay, now I'll take you to, and I will drop this link right now, to the critical mentoring multimedia adventure. Okay, so this is the page where every resource I've shared and all the downloadable things are at. This is hosted on the mentoring.org website. This will be here forever, so don't worry about being able to access it. Here's that video we watched earlier, the history, the connections to today, which you saw on those slides, and then everything we have here. So the research, that literature, that piece that I was talking about earlier, resources, a great list of books and other resources for you to go to use for this work, voices from the field. So here's some videos of people who are out there doing the work for the future, hearing from young people, a bunch of podcast episodes of with Dr. Tori and the Y-Man, the youth. Why am I forgetting Y-Man? Which is youth something action network, Youth Mentoring Action Network. Hello. Their podcast with Dr. Tori, a bunch of episodes are there. And then people who are leaders in the field and who have trained with Dr. Tori to be critical mentoring master level trainers. You can connect with them there. So here's where you can download the bulk of the EEP and all those questions, but there are multiple downloadables as you click through each of these pages. This was funded by City Foundation. Thank you, City Foundation. But again, right, there's multiple downloadables on each page. As you can see, the literature, and you can continue to click through. It is really exciting. Resources, again, connecting the critical mentoring and the EEP, which is what we've mostly gone through today. That on this checklist. Oh yeah. This checklist, which is a bit of a more of a breakdown. This has the clickable to the logic model here. This checklist is some of those questions that we talked about in those discussions, the logic model, a question guide for the original critical mentoring book, if you were going to do something like a book club and things like that, and additional tools and resources. Yay! Books on intersectionality, maybe books for your mentors to read, things on self-care and joy, language glossaries and things like that, videos, book lists. Yay! It's all right here. Voices, videos, critical mentoring space. I still have time. Self-work first, all this stuff. Read it, read it. A bunch of podcast episodes, all right here. Yeah. And then all these cool people who are in the mentoring network, Dr. Tori, their emails, you just reach back out to them and then it takes you right back to the beginning. So really, really exciting that all these resources exist and are there for you to use, pick and choose, use what you need at whatever time you need it. If you want to, as you read through and realize that there's something you want to dedicate some time to for your program and you'd like some support, please apply for a no-cost technical assistance and one of our consultants will connect with you to work through this or work through any of the supplements of the EEP for whatever your program needs, because that's why we exist. And we want to ensure that this is a huge new body of work. And we want to, again, this resource is pretty new. And I know that a lot of people weren't aware that this website is out there, which is why I wanted to hold this training during this time of year. And I'm excited that now you can go and check it out. So thank you everyone for being here. I will follow up with a copy of the slides and all this information. Thank you for coming and being in conversation. Really appreciate it. And we have a bunch of fun stuff planned for Women's History Month next month. So please keep in touch with us. Make sure you're on our newsletter so you get all that information as soon as it comes up. Follow us on social media. Thank you so much for being here and we will see you soon. Thanks everybody. Or reach out to us anytime. Email me, etc. We're always here for you guys. Thanks everybody.